This next section I want to talk about what we'd call small group. I don't know how small it has to be small group. Some of the check-in, check-out schools that we have 50 or more kids in it. But it's a subset of the full population. So this isn't something we do for everybody. Check-in, check-out, which is also known as the Behavior Education Plan, has been around for a while, but there's a lady at the University of Utah, Leanne Hawken, who was formerly a student at the University of Oregon, who has really probably written the most on it and done the most research on it. And she has a set of slides that she uses to train it that she and I have talked about several times. So I'm going to use her little set of slides to talk about this, because I think it gets across how simple check-in, check-out is. Here's the gist of it in a graphic form. A student is recommended by your TAT, SST, I-team, whoever, and we say classroom management is okay. You know, things in the classroom are working all right. Academically, kids there, we don't think that's the issue either. Next step might be small group kind of thing, check-in, check-out. So we would implement, again, check-in, check-out or behavior education plan. So here's what we do. We train every adult in the school what check-in, check-out is. And every adult is capable of doing it. So you can do this at the elementary school, the middle school, or the high school. What you do is, kid comes in the morning and goes to some key person to check in. It's probably their homeroom teacher, or if they're in elementary school, it's their classroom teacher. When they check in, they get a card. On that card, they're supposed to write down, these are my goals. They then carry that card with them all day. And at the end of every period, if it's middle school, it might be at the end of math, at the end of reading, at the end of PE, at the end of health. If it's elementary school, it might be once every hour or so, or at the end of every activity, or something like that. And all that happens is, after they've checked in with a teacher in the morning who can talk to them and say, what are you going to do? What do you got to think about? They get that feedback once an hour or so. It just says, for each of those 3 goals or so, did you do it or did you not make it? So they get regular feedback on how they're doing. In the afternoon, they take that card in and they give it to somebody. It's either the last teacher of the day, or there might be a check-in, check-out coordinator, or there's somebody. They give it to somebody and somebody says, how'd you do on your goals today? Good job. Or what do you need to be thinking about tomorrow? Or there's some little debriefing, very briefly, quick. Then that card is supposed to go home, where mom and dad get to look at it and say, how'd you do today? Good job for you on this. What do you need to think about tomorrow? And it starts over. And then we keep looking at the data and saying, how's that kid doing? And at some point we make a decision, that kid's doing so well on this, let's take them off now and see how they do. And we'll try to wean them off of it. Or we could revise it, but it keeps going like that. Here are some of the basic things. You always check in the morning. So you always get an opportunity every morning to have a positive relationship with an adult. That's one of the big benefits of it, I think, is that you get to come in and somebody gets to say, how you doing this morning? And be positive. Before you go do anything else, you have a positive. You have a chance to talk about what your goals are, because you have to pull out your card, write down the goals, and say something to the teacher. So you are thinking about what you're supposed to do today before you ever go anywhere. At the end of the day, you can set this up if you want to, like a token economy, where they can earn something for the points they earned. Now, a lot of schools, there are no things earned. You just count up your points and you're working toward a goal. So we put it on the chart. We want you to be out here, you're making it, you're doing well, that's your goal. Other schools say you get points for how many you got, and then those points could be saved up and used to buy a homework pass or something related to the curriculum. We would really like to have that go home. Although that doesn't always happen or work, it's not appropriate for every kid, but the ideal would be that you take this home, your parents sign it, and if you bring it in signed the next morning, you get an extra point just for bringing it in. So we know your parents have seen it. That's what we'd like. Here's what we really get out of it, I think. One, like I said, kids get greeting in the morning. Somebody to say, how are you? Nice to see you. What's your day going to be like? I would like to use this to also do this scan thing. If a kid comes in really angry in the morning and throwing things around, I might keep them with me for a little while and have a talk before I send them off to class. Why not get that kid ready to go out and be successful rather than ship them right out there where you know there's going to be a problem? So it gives me a chance to kind of scan and see what kids are doing. It also gives me a chance to prompt kids about the things they need to do. So if I've got a kid that constantly is not bringing their materials to class, then it gives me a chance in the morning to say, do you have your pencils with you today? Do you have your books? Do you have those things? Okay, have fun at class. But it gives me a chance to remind them of those things, set them up. And lastly, it allows them to get regular feedback, which hopefully will be positive. But this form is something that is the reinforcer for them. We can keep saying, good for you, and we can put it on there for them to see. Here's an example of a form. One of the things that I would suggest is that you not have more than 2 or 3 goals. I am concerned about this one because there are way too many things to think about. I would find for kids the 2 or 3 things that they really need to work on and work on those. If you were working in residential treatment or kids with all kinds of issues and you really need to be structured up, then you might go bigger. But in your average public school or school where kids don't have real severe behavioral difficulties, I would stick with 2 or 3. I don't see any problem with finding a kid that only has 1 issue and having that be the only thing on their card. If respect is the only issue this kid has, then why are we doing all this other stuff? What we should be checking off at the end of every period is, were you respectful to people during that period? There's no need to do all the other stuff. So I think this one's bigger than it should be. So we're greeting, we're giving feedback at predetermined times. Now here's what we know. Check-in, check-out works best with kids that like feedback from adults. There are kids that do not like talking to adults and don't want anything to do with adults, and those kids don't work as well with check-in, check-out. If they refuse to do check-in, check-out, then check-in, check-out won't work. You can't force someone to do check-in, check-out. They just won't hand in their card. They go to every class and then never show the card, then they're not doing check-in, check-out. So it's really something they have to agree to do. It doesn't work on the real resistant kids. What we want to do is tell the kids what we're looking for. During class, every teacher here is going to be looking for this behavior and this behavior. If they say that behavior was happening throughout class, then when you go up at the end, you hand them the card, they're going to say, great job, and you'll get the 2 marks from them. If they say it wasn't working, then when you come up, they're going to talk to you about how you could do that differently. And you'll get a different mark, but you'll have another chance the next day. Now, that means every teacher in the school has to be able to do check-in, check-out, which means you have to know how to have someone come up to you at the end of class and say to them, good job on this, what could you do better on that? In other words, you have to know how to reinforce and correct. So we need every teacher in the school to be able to do those things. If, excuse me, if you've got teachers that, when these kids bring up the card, say, whatever, or you were a real jerk today, then kids aren't going to start taking their cards up to those teachers, and it's not going to work. When you hand in the card, the teachers must know how to use reinforcement and correction. If they don't, it doesn't work. So we need to make sure everybody's doing that. We also like to use it as a prompt for, what are we going to do tomorrow? These are the things that are really unique to check-in, check-out. We would like to say that it's available every day. It's not just once in a while when we remember it or get around to it. It has to be continuous. Every day, everywhere you go, this is something we can use. When we decide you need check-in, check-out, or we're going to put you on check-in, check-out, we should be able to have a card set up for you and your teachers all notified that you're going to be on check-in, check-out, and you actually doing it within 3 days. So we don't want to say, let's do check-in, check-out. Yeah, next month, let's get back together. When we decide they need it, it needs to be something we can pop into place within 72 hours. It has to be something that is extremely low effort by teachers. If you've got a bunch of kids in the school that are on it, if you're the average teacher, you may have 2 or 3 kids at a time in a class, which means you're going to spend an extra minute to minute and a half at the most at the end of the class talking to a couple of kids, which, if that makes their behavior more positive when they're in your class, is either a savings in time or a wash. So we don't think you're spending more time. And if we set it up so you spend more time, then it's not going to work. It's got to be something, again, like we said, that kids agree to do. It's something every adult can and will do, and we should have somebody set up to pull these cards and look at the data. So somebody on your SST, TAT, IPBS, I-team needs to be the one who's in charge of, once a month, pulling those data out of there and saying, how are our kids on check-in, check-out doing? So when your team looks down the list, you should say, that kid's doing really well for a month. Let's start getting them off. This kid's not doing well at all. What do we do with that kid? We're going to need to change this. This isn't working. Maybe you decide to change check-in, check-out, or maybe you decide to bump that kid up the list along into simple FBA. Your team will have to make a decision based upon the data that you have. But we're going to keep monitoring it. So it's really a structure. It's a school-wide thing, but it's not for every kid. It's something we want to be setting up in your school. So if you decide to do check-in, check-out in a school you're working with, everybody in the school has to do check-in, check-out. Not just the teacher who's having a problem, unless that kid's only in their class. So when we have schools do check-in, check-out, we like to have the entire school be trained. And to train an entire school to do check-in, check-out takes about an hour or less. It isn't complicated. Everybody will understand it.
Does this mean that each kid has these cards they carry around and then the check?
Each of the kids who's on check-in, check-out would have a check-in, check-out card.
And so they could have smile faces or a check?
It could be a check, a smile face, a number, whatever you want it to be.
The problem with the kids either erasing that or adding their own.
It would need, what it would be is probably your initials over a thing, but you're right.
Okay.
Where I worked, they would have just forged my initials. We would have had to have some stamp or something to make it work. Right.
We use, we call it Check and Connect at our school.
Same thing.
Yeah. And it's a primary school, so the kids are with the same teacher all day. And they set it up, it's not the entire staff that got trained. Because I'm not really involved in it, I know about it, but they have let's say it's a 4th grade classroom teacher that has this student that's been decided. They actually meet in the morning with another teacher, like kind of a teacher, maybe a kindergarten teacher that is not in their academic schedule, and kind of build a relationship with that person. I don't know what they found. We haven't been doing it long enough, I don't think, to really have any data that says if that's good or not, but I think their idea was to take some of the pressure off that teacher whose maybe relationship with that student isn't so great, although you're not making it better either because you're kind of separating it, but
I could see arguments for and against that, and it boils down to what does your school want to do? What do you feel comfortable with? I have not heard of schools that have a particular different person that every kid meets with, unless it's the check-in, check-out coordinator. And
all different people that.
Yeah, and again, whatever works. Yeah. And I don't know of any data either that looks at that question. So there isn't a whole ton there's probably less than a dozen studies total on this right now. So if it works, keep doing it. This is what data might look like. You would look at percentage of points, and you'd set a goal for a kid. We would like you to have 10 days in a row of 90% of your points by this date, or we'd like you to have 100% of your points 3 days in a row by this date. You just set a goal, and then you chart it and you look at it. Wherever you end the day would be this chart. So if you ended the day going to see a different person, then that person would have your chart. In a lot of schools, they'll have 2 or 3 designated check-in, check-out people, and those people keep the charts for the kids they have. And so when they come in, they just say to each kid, see your chart, how'd you do, 80%? Where you need to be, you're looking good, okay, what do you need to think about tomorrow? Okay, think about that, we'll see you in the morning. Gone, next kid. Very quick. Just come right on through and doing it. Should This is another card that is set up, I think, again, bigger than what's necessary for the kind of kid we're talking about. But this one set it up for a kid in an elementary school where it's, we don't know what we're going to be doing in the morning, but it's class time. So there's class time, there's recess, there's class time, there's lunch, there's class time, there's recess, there's class time. Now, we may or may not be doing anything involving reading or math or anything in that class time, but during that time, you should still be doing those things. And then you just get one thing circled on each of these and a teacher initial at the end. So as long as I'm using a pen and I circle one of those numbers, that's where it would be. If the kid circled anything else, then it would be obvious because there's two things circled. So we just rank, not at all, kind of, or really good on each one of them. And then you would have an adding up. Again, I think the older kids get, the more this is something you might be able to do, but I think it's just more complicated than you really need it to be. And I would urge you to, if you're going to do check-in, check-out things, keep this simple. Simple for the kids, simple for you. I don't want to use a calculator to figure this out. I would like just to look at it and say, oh, your percentage is this, and be done. So the simpler it is, I think the better it will be. Here is some of the data, school contacts per week, for 9 different kids in the first cohort of the study. So we could say check-in, check-out is working for number 1. Check-in, check-out's working for kid 2. Check-in, check-out has not been a success for kid 3. Kid 4 is looking good. Kid 5, check-in, check-out has not done it for that kid. Why? Who knows, but it hasn't. 6, iffy. But it's better, but we don't know if that's significant. 7, didn't work. 8 didn't have a lot of problems to begin with, but 8 is doing great. And 9 didn't really make a difference, or if it did, it even got worse. So I would say out of 9 kids, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 are definitely kids that should stay on check-in, check-out and begin to fade off over time. Some should be faded off sooner than others. But there are 4 kids that it's not working for, and you'll have to decide. Is it not working because we didn't teach it to them well? Because they're not handing in their card? Because teachers aren't following through? Or because it just isn't enough for this kid? If it's one of the first 3, we need to make it work. If it's the last one, then we move away from this and go down our chart a little further, in which FBA is the next thing. Here's the second cohort. Not working for 10. Working great for 11, great for 12, great for 13, 14, 15, 16, not for 17. Yes for 18, 19, 20. So out of the next group of kids we had, a whole bunch of kids are doing well, but there are 2 that we would say, what's going on? Who decides what to do next for 10 and 17? The I team, the TAT, the SST, that team looks at the data and says, what's going on with that kid? Should we change it, or should we punt and move on to the FBA? But they'll be the ones that decide. Here is data from surveys that Leanne did with all the kids in the study, the teachers and their parents. Do you believe that being on check-in, check-out changed your kid's behavior at school? Students said yes, we liked it. Middle one was parents, yes, we liked it, but not as much as our kids. And teachers, yeah, pretty much. Which teachers are a hard group to get to say something exciting. Did you think this made academics get better? Kids and teachers both said 4 out of 6, but we're not like jumping up and down. Parents liked it a little more. Do you think this was easy? Both parents and kids said 6 out of 6 is easy. And teachers said 4.5, which for teachers is pretty good to say something's easy. Do you think this is worth the time and effort? And again, kids, parents, and teachers all said generally they thought this was worth the effort it took to do it. And would you recommend to others to use this? And they were all at the around 5 or 6 on that. With the second cohort, about the same, except the teachers were maybe a little more cynical up front on this one. But basically the kids and the parents across the board on both cohorts said, this is something that's pretty simple, that's worthwhile to do. It didn't make gigantic changes, according to teachers, but it was positive. So they believed it had less impact on academics in both cohorts than they thought it had on behavior. If you want to do this, there is a book that tells you how to set it up.
Can I ask a quick question about the last one?
You may.
Was it the opinion of the teachers, or was it actual, like, they had collected on through academics?
This was just their opinion. And you would hope that they would think back and think about kids' data and say, did they get better on this? But I don't know that they did. They just asked them what they thought about it. This book tells you how to set it up and gives you lots of ideas. I have nothing to do with this book. I make no money if you buy it. Don't care one way or the other. I just wanted to be able to show you that if you really wanted to have a guide to help you set the whole thing up, there is one out there. And it is by Rob Horner and Leon Hawken and Dan Crone, who are the people that set up these studies and have done most of the work on this to date. But again, I'm not showing you that because I want you to buy something. In fact, shoplift it. Yes. Okay, next issue in terms of group, social skills. Same concept. Is there a small group of kids in the school who need the same thing, that it would be simpler just to pull them all together and teach it than it would be to try to hit them all? Social skills, by definition, are things that take two people. You don't need social skills when you're sitting home alone watching TV. So to teach social skills, we need to have social situations. So when you've got multiple kids with social skills deficits, it makes sense to teach them together so we can practice together. So social skills are those things which make kids successful. So when you are out on the street with your friends hanging out, there are a set of social skills that make you be judged as socially competent. Those are probably a different set of social skills than what you use when you're visiting grandma or when you're in the school. So one of our issues with social skills is, which ones do we use? In the school, we use the ones that will make kids successful. So you have to decide, what are the behaviors that would make kids successful here at school? Relationships will be a big one. There are real natural settings where if you don't punch somebody when they call you a name, you will not be successful. That is not the case at school. And so we are going to teach. While it may be different somewhere else, here at school, this is what we do when that happens. And I know we do have the parents that come in and say, I told my kid to hit people when they do that, and they need to hear it the same as their kids do. That is not appropriate here. What you do at home, what you do on the street is your business. What we do here is this. That will not be tolerated. This is what the skill is, and that's what we're teaching. So we need to make very clear to kids what is appropriate here as opposed to somewhere else. The other issue that we have when we teach social skills is that a lot of the social skills that we all have, we take for granted. We don't realize, we don't even know what the rules are. And I think the best example of that would be something like handshaking. What's the rule for when you shake hands with somebody?
Grasp firmly, look in the eye, and go up and down.
Okay, that's how. When? When you first meet them. Ever again? When you're leaving? Okay, so I shake your hand when I first meet you, and when I leave you. Any other ever again? When you see him again. How much time has to pass before it would be appropriate to shake their hand again? So like if you walk down to the end of the hall and come back, would you shake their hand again?
A different day.
So do you shake all your coworkers' hands every morning? How much time has to pass? If this is something you're going to teach your kids how to shake hands, you're going to need a rule. You shake someone's hand when you first meet them, and then at least 37 hours thereafter. You see, the thing is, there isn't a rule. We all get by kind of looking for cues. If they're starting to put their hand out, it just feels right. I don't know what it is, so I'm ready. But that's the way we all operate, and it isn't odd. It isn't awkward either. But how would you teach that to kids who couldn't understand it? And we're going to run into that with all social skills. Well, how do we know when to? Well, I don't know. How will we teach that? Practice. Role plays. Let them have different situations to kind of play with it. Practice. That's what it is. It's practice. We didn't have the skills we had with simple things like handshaking until we had to practice it over and over again. So, we're going to operate under some specific assumptions and themes as we do this. That we're going to focus on teaching things we want kids to do. Social skills aren't about don'ts. So we aren't going to have a group where we teach kids how not to do something. We're going to teach them what we want. This is the skill. We wouldn't have a math group where we spent all our time saying 2 + 2 is not 5. And we're not going to have a social group spend all our time saying don't hit. What we're going to do is we're going to say, what should you do under these circumstances, and teach it. Problem behavior is something kids have learned. How they learn to do this? Probably at home. We have those kids. What happens when someone says something you don't like at home? Well, mom and dad punch each other. Okay? What's a better way? Or maybe not even better, what's the way we're going to do it here? We'd like to hope that maybe that would not happen at home, but the reality is you don't have any control over any of the contingencies at home, so the best we can hope for is that we can make them be successful enough here that it will generalize to something else. So we're going to teach and we're going to reteach. So what we want to do is bring these kids together, tell them why they're here. And again, not because I said so, not because you're bad, not because this is what we do, but because we're going to learn ways to be able to be really successful. We're going to learn ways to have your teacher always say you're doing a great job. We're going to learn ways, stuff that goes back to them. Tell them what we're going to do. When you're in this group, we're going to do these things. Let them know what's coming. And try to keep everybody engaged. Lots of questions. Lots of interaction. What I'm going to show you are some movies from a couple of social skills groups that I ran for some PBS schools that I was working with in Florida. So these are schools that are doing PBS, and they came to me and said, we've identified a couple of groups of kids in these schools that are having lots of difficulties. And we'd like to run a social skills group because we figure these kids all need the same thing. Would you be willing to run it for us and have some teachers watch so that they could take over when you're done? And so I said yes, and we videotaped so I could break it up and show you some little chunks. So what I want to do is kind of just lead you through some of the basic things that we were thinking about when we put these together and what we did. So I always start that first day by talking to the kids just simply about what's going on and kinds of things that happen in the world. I won't go talk to them until I have heard from the teachers. Why am I teaching this group of kids? What's this all about? What do they need to know? Because everything I'm going to talk about is going to be focused around that issue. So this one group of kids that you're going to see, the focus of this all was anger management. The teacher said, this is a group of kids that when someone does something they don't like, their first response is to hit them. Each of these kids has been suspended for exactly that. So even though it's a group of first and second graders, that's who they are, that's why they're here.
Here's what I'm going to ask. If you get mad at somebody and you hit them or call them a name or push them or something, who gets in trouble? What do you think, Dre? Who gets in trouble? Yourself. So let's say that I want to get Stacy in trouble. So I come over here and no one's looking and I start doing this. And the teacher doesn't see that. And then Stacy yells at me, man, quit doing that, quit doing that. did I just be able to do? I made him get in trouble. I made him get in trouble. How did he not let me get him in trouble?
By telling the teacher.
Telling the teacher's a good one.
So really, I start off the day just talking about these are things that happen in classes, this is what's going on. This is what we're going to talk about, is how not to let other people get you in trouble. So I spend a lot of time discussing and engaging. And one of the things you're going to notice is these little yellow pieces of paper. I've set up a point system with them in here because these are all kids that have some behavior problems or have had very recently. I'm coming in as a guy they've never seen before. And I'm trying really hard to engage them as my behavior management, which I always think is the best behavior management, is strong engagement. But I'm using the points as my backup. So I'm throwing out lots of points. I want to give out on that first day 1,000,000 points. Those points are my way of saying good job. And so every time they're doing the right thing, I'm giving points and I'm saying, I like the way you guys are looking at me right now. I like the way you guys are listening. I like the way you guys are following along. And I'm just giving them tons of points. And all I do on the first day is I say, how many points do you think we can add up? And then we count them at the end of the day and talk about, wow, look at all the points these guys earned. They do not need to be exchanged for anything. I've used them all the time without having them exchanged. Sometimes if I think we need an exchange to get the kids to buy in with the little kids, I'll use something the first day, and then we just go to, oh, let's see if you could get more than you got last time. When I've done this with high school kids, the one thing that I would tell you, if you're going to do this with high school kids, here's your trick. Use a video camera and tell them they get to video themselves doing it. In fact, what I've done with high school kids is I've said, your job is to make videos for the rest of the kids on how to do these things. They get so engaged with the video component of it, they kind of forget that they're in a group. So you could do that with the little kids too, but the older kids, I let them do the filming, I let them do all the stuff. So you can kind of bury it in something like that. But here's just more engagement.
I want someone to tell me what it feels like to be mad. And if people can raise their hand and tell me this, and don't talk out, I don't know, 2 points. Brandon, what does it feel like when you're mad?
I feel like when somebody's like, oh, shut up, bitch.
What's your body feel like? Where do you feel? Do you feel different somewhere?
Yeah,
Where does it feel different?
yeah. In your body.
Your body. So do you feel tight or loose? Tight. So you feel your fists kind of go like this when you get mad? What about your jaw? Is your jaw loose? Tight. Tight. When you get mad, do you feel your teeth go together? When you get mad, do you feel hot or cold?
Hot.
Hot. When you get mad, do you breathe slow or fast?
So what I did was I asked the teachers, what would you like them to do when they get mad? Right now, what are they doing? They're punching people. They're strangling people. They're kicking people. They're grabbing hair. They're calling names. They're threatening. Okay, what do you want them to do? I agree those are all not good things. What do you want? Because I've got to teach them what to do instead, and I don't want to teach them to do something that you don't like. What would make them successful in this school if somebody calls them a name, if they get mad? And so we had to think out. And the question I always like to ask is, show me some of the really successful kids around here. Kids that everybody likes. Kids that get their homework done. Kids that, what would they do if someone called them a name? Those are the behaviors we're looking for. The successful kids' behaviors. So they came up with walk away, tell a teacher, count to 10. They came up with this big list of things they said they thought kids should do. So I don't know that any one of those is right, but we've got a list of kids to pick from. And so what I'm trying to do now is get them to think, how do you know when it's time to use one of these things? Well, I'm trying to get them to identify in their own bodies, what do I feel like? When can I identify that now's the time to think through that list? So we started there. I try to get all the kids in the group, and I even do this with the high school kids. Listen, participate, and freeze are the 3 things that I would expect from you when you're in here. Listen means when I'm talking or someone else is talking, you're looking at them and you're not talking. Participate means that you're going along with the things we're all doing, and freeze means when we're in the middle of a role play and I say freeze, we stop. Even with the high school kids. I did this once with the alternative high school in Lexington, Kentucky years ago. And even with, this is the alternative high school, but even with the high school kids, the role plays can get out of hand, where a kid decides, I'm going to start doing it the wrong way to get everybody else to laugh. And we want the freeze rule that we know the role play's over and everybody goes and sits down, that you have to have that way to kind of safety it when things go wrong. What I like to do again is use that point system. If your kids are really, really challenging, then you're going to need to make those points be worth something. But they don't have to be worth something big. Have them be worth, at the end of the period, the people that have above a criteria level of points get to have computer time, have to build it into the curriculum. Don't go out and buy a bunch of candy and toys and goodies. So what I like to do then is review.
Thanks for raising your hand. Yes, buddy, what else?
And when you're listening, when somebody else is talking, you don't talk.
That's right. We don't talk when someone else is talking. Yes, Stacy?
You don't call out.
You don't call out. What do you do instead of calling out? What do you do instead of calling out? What do you do instead of calling out?
Be quiet.
What do you do instead of calling out? Just raise your hand. Very good.
Then we move into the actual lesson itself. I give them a rule for when to use the skill and when not to. I give them a set of variations then. You could do it like this, you could do it like that, you could walk away, you could tell teachers, no teacher there, you could go over here and do this, you could count to 10, you could find another friend and ask them, you could, and so I give them a lot of variations for it, and then I give it to them in natural examples. All of the examples I use when I teach came from the teachers. So if you referred a kid to me, I would say, give me 4 or 5 examples of when this kid's been really angry, what happened to make him angry and what he did. Those are the examples I use. So he says, oh, one day he was out in the playground, a kid came up and called him a fathead, and he blah, blah, blah. So I say, so let's say you're on the playground, and someone comes up and calls you a fathead. Here's the way to, and I would make that be the example. I'm not going to make up the examples, because my examples may or may not be relevant to any of the kids. That's the problem, I think, with going out and buying the published social skills curricula, is that somebody sat in their office and made up all the examples. I want real examples that those kids hear and go, oh, I get it. That's me. That's where I am. So I'm asking the teachers to give me all of those. Then I model. I do not let the kids demonstrate it to me until they can tell me why I'm doing it right. So I'll model it and then I'll say, was that right? Here's the rule. We always do it like this. Watch me. Am I doing it that way? Yes. How'd you know? Because you did these things. Yes, that's the rule. So I will always model and make them tell me. Once they can tell me they know what it is, then it's their turn to practice. I won't let kids practice until I know they're going to get it right. I want them to get it right every time they practice. So the instruction part before their practice is really important. So here's my model of just listening, one of the basic group rules.
I'll practice. Alberto, I want you to tell me something. Let's hold on just a second. While he's talking, I want you guys to be the judges about me.
What are judges?
Judges. I want you to tell me if I'm doing a good job. Hang on a second, just a second. Hang on a second. Wait, so I'm going to have him tell me a story. And while he's telling the story, you tell me if I'm listening. If I am listening, DeAndre, what will I be doing? 2 things.
Listening,
Okay.
not talking.
I'll be not talking, and what else will I be doing?
Looking
Looking right at it. Wow, that guy's smart. So, Emerson, if I'm doing a good job, what will I be doing? Not talking and listening. I'll be listening if I'm not talking, and I'm looking right at it. Man, smart people here.
So now I know that they know what we're looking for. Then I can go into the parts where I can get some guided practice. So I'm going to actually jump up and model it now. And I'm going to have them model it along with me. I'm going to have them play along. While I'm doing this, I demonstrate the wrong things, not them. They're playing a role that's just one of the bystanders. I demonstrate the wrong way, and then I say, why is that the wrong way? What would happen if you did it that way? Why shouldn't we do it that way? What should we do instead? Then I'll demonstrate it a right way. Once we've gotten all the wrong and right ways demonstrated, and they've been able to say yes and no when I do it, then I'm going to sit down and let them do it. But I'm really, again, cautious of not letting them practice something that they failed at over and over already. I don't want them to come into this group and fail at it again. Second thing is, many of them would like to fail at it on purpose because it's funny. And when I say, what's another way that's wrong? They'll say, I'll show you one. And we have to remember, no, my job is to show you the wrong ways. Yours is always the right way. The reason you're here is because we already know you can do it the wrong way. So this is me demonstrating, and then I ask them.
I breathe it fast, too.
Yeah.
I should be thinking, you know what I should be doing? I should be thinking to myself, uh-oh, I feel tight, I'm breathing hard, I'm starting to feel hot. I better do something smart right now. Tell me to do something smart right now. Man, get back!
No.
Why was that not smart?
Bad.
Why was that not smart? If I was in the classroom and said, what would happen to me if I went over and did that? You look at him.
You might get in trouble. The teacher will put you in timeout.
Yeah, Brandon is raising his hand here, and I really like that. Guys, help me.
You know, I'm always walking this tightrope between I want you to raise your hand, and we're all really engaged and enthusiastic. And I don't want to shut that down, but at some point, the really engaged kind of started to overflow. And then I had to say, I'm looking for hands that are raised. But, you know, I don't want it to get so that nobody talks on these things. I'm asking them to talk. So here's a chance now for them to practice.
But let's say, how do you win when someone makes you mad? Yes.
You can walk away or
Exactly right. All right, this is 2 points for everybody if these guys can get it right. You guys are out playing on the playground, and I'm going to come up and I'm going to tell you guys, I'm going to call your name, and I'm going to tell you to go away. You can't play on my part of the playground. Would that make you mad if someone did that to you on the playground? All right, so how are you going to win? You guys talk together and figure out what you're going to do to win. I'll go over here, I'll listen. You ready, Ed? All right. You guys are watching this, and if they do it right, if they win, everybody here gets 2 points. If I win, that means I make them mad and I get them in trouble. You guys don't get any. But everybody gets 2 if they win. All right, ready? Hey, you baby heads, this is my playground. You guys go play somewhere else. Go away, baby heads. This is my part of the playground. Go away. Okay, freeze. Great statues. All right, you guys have a seat. We better let these guys say what they think. Who won? Who won? They won? They beat me? How did they end up beating them? So who's the one that's...
The last thing I do then is we go to this review and test. There's no paper and pencil test. So when I say review, when I think everybody has demonstrated it and everybody gets it, then I'm going to have one day where I try all new things. I've saved back a bunch of the things teachers have told me. That one about calling them baby heads in the playground, as one of the teachers said, set them off one time. Am I really making them mad when I go over there and call them baby heads? No. I'm just getting them to show me they know how to do the pieces. So now I've saved a couple back, and I want to see them do it on a novel one. Here are some kids that have not demonstrated it yet, and I'm going to ask them to do it with one they haven't seen. And what I do on these last days is I make it worth a bunch of points. So it's like this celebration. If they get it right, the whole class got this ton of points, which again really are kind of meaningless. But
They're going to do it in 2 groups, and they both have to do it right. So the first first I'm going to say something, do something to these guys, and then I'm going to go do something to these guys, and I want you guys to get together. You guys have to do something different than they did. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to do something to command. You guys get together. You two have to decide to do one of those things, and you guys have to do a different one. And I'm going to make it hard.
Very hard. Ready.
Okay, so we're out here playing on the playground. Oh, I don't know. 6 points for this. They both have to do it right. I think I'm going to win. I'll put a win with at least one of these guys because I'm going to make them so mad. And then I'll be the winner.
Give them 20 points.
Okay, here we go. Ready? You guys shouldn't be on this playground because you're both too stupid to be on this playground. You guys go somewhere else and play. You guys are babies. Babies shouldn't be on this playground.
That kind of name.
Freeze. Dang, I don't think I won again.
No,
Did anybody here get in trouble?
no, good you.
I'm going to get in trouble because I told the teacher I lose.
So 6 meaningless points are really exciting at the end. That's the end of that. But if you know the social skills literature at all, what you know is that it says you can make any kid do anything in that group, and when the group is over, they'll never do it again. How do we get them to do it somewhere else now that we know they have the skills? They have the skills, they understand the skills, they can tell you about the skills, and they can demonstrate the skills. Will they use the skills? What we've got to do now is we've got to create our traps. Okay, the rules are in place. What are the routines and arrangements to set these kids up to do it the right way? What kind of prompts are you going to need to use? What kinds of arrangements will you need to use? Where should they be? Where should teachers be? What are there kids that you should kind of try to keep them away from? Are there all of those are things we're going to have to think of. Let me show you an example here where we go through, and I'll show you how we actually did the generalization piece. Different skill. We'll go through it real quickly, but I want to show you we end this one by making them do it somewhere else. So this one was, the teacher said, problem behavior was if we ask a kid, tell a kid that they did something wrong or get after them about something, they blow up and they scream and yell at us. And so I said, what would you like the kids to do? And they said, we'd like them to just shut up. And so I said, they're not going to do that. That's not a replacement behavior. What do you want them to do? And so they said, okay, we'd like them, if we accuse them of something or tell them they did something wrong, we'd like them to use an inside voice and explain instead of argue. No running and yelling, no jumping around, no screaming, just say, here's what really happened. And explain their point. That's what we'd like them to do. Now this is not my idea, it's the teacher's, because this is not my rule. What would make you successful in this school? So that's what I'm teaching, because that's what they asked me to teach. So I'm trying to give them 2 basic things. 1, inside voice, and 2, explaining.
When I go to the teacher, the teacher's going to tell me I did something I didn't do. Here are some things I need to remember. Are you ready? 1, should my voice be loud? What? I didn't do that. Or soft?
Soft.
Inside voice. So one thing you have to remember, when a teacher says something to you that you disagree with, your voice should be
Soft.
soft. What should your voice be when you want to talk to the teacher? Soft. The teacher said you did something, you didn't do it. What should your voice be, loud or soft? Jarvis, the teacher comes up and says that you hit somebody, you weren't even there. You want to talk about it. Should your voice be loud or soft? Very good. Let's give every...
And here's the second part.
What's going to happen if you're the teacher? Coming still a teacher at Francesca? What happens if I do it like this? Tell me again. Say that again. No! I know! I didn't do that! What's going to happen now, Ro?
You will get in trouble then.
Why would I get in trouble if I'm doing that way, Cody?
Because you want your voice loud and
You're getting your I don't get a chance to say anything. I wanted to say what was going on. No one even let me say it.
Okay, so now we talked about it. They're going to get a chance to practice it. I'll show you one of these. What we did was, again, teachers told us, here are situations where these kids have had some problems. So here we had 2 kids that had both been accused of something in a teacher's room. And they both had thrown a fit and a tizzy, and actually on this particular occasion had been suspended just for the argument over doing something. So I'm going to go back through and I'm going to do it and have them see if they can do it the right way. This is the starting point.
What's your voice going to have to be like, Darian? High or low? Are you going to argue or explain?
Explain.
Okay, you guys ready? 3 points if they can do it right. Francesca and Darian, I don't like you guys standing over here. I know you took some stuff off my desk. I know you guys have been stealing stuff. I'm going to call your mom. So you guys just need to go sit down. You saw 2 other people over here doing that? Freeze.
Now the obvious question, and I had it too, is what if they did do the wrong thing? But that's not what the teachers asked me to do. They asked me to get them to be able to respond when somebody said something to them that they didn't like. I think there is another skill that I'm betting they probably don't have, which is how do you take responsibility for something? But again, that's not what the teachers asked me to do. So, the next thing we do is we bring in one of the teachers. And we start bringing teachers in to do this, because right now they're doing it with me. I'm not their teacher. I don't even work at the school. So let's bring a teacher in.
Let's try it. I want to see. I want to watch this. You guys, 3 points if Jarvis can get this right. See, you can do both things.
Jarvis, you kicked Stacy. You are going to have to sit out at recess.
Freeze. The statutes. I'm going to give everybody a point for statutes. I don't know, Miss Neal, what do you think about that?
I think he was very calm and explained it in a
Pretty
nice,
calm
quiet
voice.
voice.
Nice explaining. He
Did not argue.
He didn't say, He didn't yell, no way, not me, you're wrong. He said, it must have been someone else. He was very calm. It was 3 points.
Very.
Okay, that's step 1 of generalization. Have the teacher be in the group. But that's not going to do it either. Where we're going to end up is we need to go to the classroom and have it work. So here's what we did. We had each of these teachers take these kids back to the room, and we told them they were going to be set up. So teacher says to this kid, sometime this morning, I'm going to accuse you of something. And when I do, are you going to use a loud voice or a soft voice? Are you going to argue with me or explain it to me? Explain. Okay, sometime this morning it's coming. And then all morning long this teacher's walking by. It's coming soon. I'm not going to tell you when, but it's coming. And walking back by here. Oh, not now, but it's coming. And they're just doing this over and over. And then at some point hey, you're the one that, she answers me in a soft voice and explains, and I say, oh, that was awesome. You were really good at that. That was amazing. I thought I'd be able to trick you. I'm going to do this again sometime tomorrow, but you don't know when. Sometime tomorrow, though. And then I do this again with this. It's coming. But I say that a little bit less. And I do it. And then I say, sometime in the next few days, it's coming again. And I don't do as much of my it's coming. I just say that maybe once a day or twice a day. And then sometime in the next week or two, and then in the next month, well, at some point, it happens for real. And what we've done is we've built the real one into the fake ones, and we've just had them practicing doing it the right way in the natural environment. We've trapped generalization by doing that. What you have to go back and ask is, how do you do that with all the other little social skills that you teach? The most difficult one is making a kid mad. Because what it means is you've got to make them mad, and it's ethically really difficult. You can't say, go over and call them a name to see if they punch you in the face. So what we have to do instead is we have to talk a lot about it, and we have to continue to reinforce kids for doing anything other than punching someone in the face. So we say, what are you going to do at recess today? Are you going to get along with people? What will you do if you don't? And then we just keep saying to them, I really like the way you spent a whole recess today where you got along with everybody, and if people made you mad, you must have been walking away from them because you weren't having arguments. And you just got to keep reinforcing the absence of the problem, because you can't actually set up the problem. When you can set up the problem, then you can go ahead and do it that way.
Does the rest of the class know what's going on? I mean, once you bring them back into the natural setting, are they aware that this is going on between the teacher and the student? Do they have any part in helping with this?
With that particular skill, probably not. There may be a skill that's class-based where we involve everybody. And if we were doing that, then I would involve, even though I may have taken her and really taught her, I would also give that instruction to the whole class, and we would do it as a class. But with something where it's just her issue and it really doesn't involve the rest of you, we probably don't involve the rest of you in that little role play either, or that little test.
So the rest of the class is kind of questioning why she's saying, I like the way you know, as you're giving him all these cues, not yet, all that kind of stuff.
Well, I'm probably doing that more subtly, though, and coming back. I'm not standing in front of the whole class and yelling to her, it's coming, because everybody's going to go, what's coming? But it would be more between me and her. Yeah. And I think there are a lot of things where you can involve the whole class, and there are a lot of social skills that are best done with the class. But we're really looking at, but what if there's a kid or two that can't get the instruction at that level that you need to bring out and do that with them more explicitly to get them to pick it up?
What was your time frame for meeting with this group? Was it daily? Was it every
No.
couple times a week?
These groups met a half hour total, and out of that we probably got 20 minutes after a 5-minute transition in and out. 20 minutes twice a week for about 3 weeks was each of these groups. And we spent the first 2 sessions out of those 3 weeks just doing the listening and role play, and you do the right thing, I do the wrong thing. And the next 4 sessions on what are all the things we could possibly do to make this work? Am I doing it right? And then we move into you're doing it right, and then the final session, the test thing, and then we bring in the teachers and have them start transitioning it back out. It's very short-term things. We just is in and out, quick things. Yes?
What was the follow-up on this, seeing different work?
I wish I had a great answer for that. There wasn't one. Other than the people in the school collecting their data school-wide on these kids, are they still being referred for the same issues? And honestly, I didn't ask for that, look at that. That's what the schools were doing. So we would hope that that's the follow-up, that SST, TAT, I-team would look at their data and say, are these kids now having fewer of the problems for which they were referred to us in the first place? If they are, this is working. If they're not, then we need to do something bigger, better, different, go on to FBA, whatever. That's the way it should work, and I'll assume that that's the way it did work because these were PBS schools, but I was not involved in doing that to actually, I don't have data on outcomes for these kids, is what I'm saying. But that's a great question. Other questions about that? I have one more thing I want to show you. We're ready to break for lunch here in just a second. This is something I like to use to talk to people about basic behavior management stuff. If we were to say that this is a classroom, and each of these yellow stars represents a problem behavior that happened in the last week, there are a lot of problems. Problems in the classroom can be looked at just like PBS in the school. So if you're in a school that's doing PBS, they should understand this logic. When you go to look at what's happening, the first thing you want to do in your school is say, hallway, cafeteria, restroom. Who's doing what in there, when are they doing it, and why? We can do the same thing in the classroom. And you can find that there are predictable problems. The sink, the lineup time, these kids together, the coat area. And once you predict who's doing what, when and where, and we can talk about why. Why do you think kids have a lot of problems in the code area? It's small, a bunch of them in there at one time, and we can't see them. There's your why. Why do you think kids have problems at the sink? Water is fun. Why do you think kids have problems at the doorway? Everybody wants to be first in line. So you know why. So if you were talking to a teacher about basic classroom management, one of the things I like to do is draw a picture of the room and say, randomly, let's say we're going to throw, here where the problem behaviors stick in your classroom. Where would they stick in your classroom? And they'll be able to tell you. Oh, they're going to stick here, 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 and then ask them, who? And if they say only the boys in that area, it's the older kids in this area, it's just that kid here, it's just get in the who's, figure out what's predictable. When? Is it all day or just at particular times during the day? And once we know who, what, when, where, and why, you can now create your routines and arrangements. This one happens right before lunch with all the kids. Okay, then you need a routine for how to line up. When should you use that routine? Right before lunch is when you should start talking about it. Don't wait until after lineup, it'll be too late. Right before lineup, you start talking about, here's the routine. You're going to line up like this with this. Do you need a routine for this? Maybe you need a rule. One person at a time at the sink. Or raise your hand to use the sink. Those are routines that you put in place to make it work. What do you need? We don't know what this is, but I would certainly say, looks like a lot of kids having problems that are together. Maybe that's not a good grouping. And then there's this kid who I might want closer to me. Or maybe not. But I might want to say, if I'm up moving around a lot, and this is my traffic pattern, is I'm kind of moving around these places, if I could put that kid up in here, I'd walk by them more often, and there's my proximity. So I like to use this as a way, if you have a teacher saying, I don't know what to do with management, I like to start with a map of the classroom, just like we do with the school. When we train schools to do school-wide PBS, the first thing we do is bring everybody together and say, where do things happen in your school? When do they happen there? What's happening? Who's doing it? Why? And then we say, okay, if we know kids are going to have problems in the hallway at 2 p.m. yelling and screaming, then what's the simplest routine and arrangement we could put in place to prevent that? Same logic here. PBS moved to the classroom just means there were fewer people having the discussion. It's probably just the teacher. So that's the way we want to run this. We want to move toward thinking PBS. After lunch, we're going to start talking about individual kids, and I'm going to come back and talk about the same thing again. We know who, it's that one kid. What is he or she doing? When do they do it? Where do they do it? And function is, why did they do it? That's the function part. Here, we could talk about that as function here too. Why do they do it? They want to be first in line. That's function. We don't need to call it an FBA, but when we talk about an individual kid and say, why is that kid doing it wrong? That's FBA. So this afternoon when we go through your case studies, I want you to be thinking function all the way back to classroom management when we start with them. So, Sherry, what's our lunch plan?
I believe they have a buffet set up right outside and then you bring it back in here.
Okay. So we're almost there for lunch. Go!